What's up, everyone? Welcome to This Day in Philly Sports History for February 27th, 2025. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Welcome to a Thursday edition of the podcast. Let's get some quick housekeeping out of the way. First, quick programming note. Next week, Friday, and then the following week, Monday and Tuesday. Or actually, Friday, I'm going on my work schedule. Friday through Tuesday, the following week, we'll be in Clearwater. We'll still have some shows coming out. Just the timing might be a little off. The length and quality might not be what you're used to. So just a heads up for that. Also, on Saturday, if you get this podcast through Apple Podcasts, I received a message that there's going to be maintenance on Apple Podcasts, but I'm not sure if that's like on the back end for my analytics, whether it's the whole platform or what. So just a heads up, if you do get it on Apple, there might be some delays on Saturday due to Apple maintenance. You can always get it on Spotify or watch the video on YouTube. Either way, every platform you get your podcast on, this one is available on, as well as on YouTube. And then, starting Saturday, we're wrapping up today and tomorrow. We're wrapping up our Black History Legacy Makers with Philly Ties. We're going to start a feature in honor of Women's History Month, as well as March Madness, where we're going to spotlight some women's Big Five players that are in the Hall of Fame, Big Five Hall of Fame. So looking forward to that as well. As always, be sure to follow me on social media, Jimbo_Mont, Twitter and TikTok, on Instagram at Philly Jimbo. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. That way you don't have to worry about Apple Podcasts going down. That's at Jimbo_Mont. And then check out my friends over at onpattison.com. Great Philly sports coverage. They have a newsletter delivered right to your inbox. We were featured in there yesterday talking about the Flyers. But great Philly sports coverage, specifically with the Phillies. They do a very, very nice job with the Phillies. Even yesterday's spring training game, kind of watching the game flow or the game cast, however you want to call it. But good stuff happening over at On Pattison, so go check them out. And then the Philadelphia Sports Hall of Fame ballot is available. It was sent out to the members. Already coming back. We've started to tally and kind of look to see the trends and everything that are happening. But you have a chance to have your voice heard. The link is in the description. Fill out the fan vote. And if your vote, your ballot is most closely matches, if your ballot, I always have trouble getting this out. If your ballot most closely matches the actual induction class, you will win two free VIP tickets to the ceremony in November down at Live Casino. Basically, fill out a ballot. If yours comes closest to matching what the actual induction class is, you will be hobnobbing with all of the big wigs in Philly sports history. So go fill that out, and if have a chance to win two free VIP tickets to the ceremony. I will be better at that tomorrow, I promise. All right, so I told you yesterday, and I didn't expect it to the next episode to be the very next day. However, the Real Housewives of the Philadelphia 76ers continues. First of all, the game. They lost 110 to 105. They were down big early, battled back, actually had a lead, 4-point lead with 3 minutes left, roughly, and couldn't get it done, couldn't close it out. Kelly Oubre was blowing kisses to the Knicks bench. Didn't really work out too well for him with that. That is now 9 in a row and spiraling out of control. But I got to say, I was actually rooting against the Sixers, and actually I was surprised they covered. I had them minus 9.5, or the Knicks minus 9.5 yesterday. But every loss at this point is a good one, especially when you're trying to keep that the top 6 protected pick. I think we're in the realm now where we're close to being able to kind of track the Sixers draft tracker. I know they're just as close to a playoff spot, but maybe starting on March 1st on Saturday, we'll start tracking where the Sixers are, because it's getting down. I think there's like 26, 25 games left. So we're close where we can start tracking that. But the Real Housewives part. So Paul George, if you do or do not know, has a podcast with a couple guys. Announced after the last episode of the podcast that he's going to be stepping away from the podcast to focus on his health, his mental well-being, and prioritize basketball to get into shape, to kind of go on a little playoff run and get this team into the championship. Well, lots of issues with this. First of all, as somebody who does a daily podcast and works full-time, has 2 young kids, I don't know how much this podcast takes away from my ability to exercise, my ability to hang out with my kids, and things like that. Granted, I am not a professional basketball player, so we'll see. But I guess if your podcast is taking up that much of your time, maybe you should have been focusing on basketball back in October when training camp started. Just a thought. And the timing of this is very peculiar because you've let the season spiral out of control up until this point and it wasn't an issue. So I don't know. It's just a weird thing that. So I guess, are you admitting that your podcast was taken away from your ability to focus on the Sixers? And if so, we have larger issues than just what is happening with the Sixers and Joe's knee. So the fact that he said to get into basketball shape, does that mean you're not in basketball shape right now and potentially have not been the entire season? So many questions I have about this. And to be completely honest, and I can't take credit for this quote, I saw, I believe it might have been Spike Eskin tweeted this out, but I 100% agree. I'm fine if you take a break from basketball and focus on the podcast, because the last thing we need now is for you to get all up in your feelings and be like, I'm good. But it's just an odd thing. And again, that's the latest in the Real Housewives of the Philadelphia 76ers. This team is a mess. It starts at the top with Josh Harris, goes down to Elton Brand, Daryl Morey. I mean, hell, at this point, the players aren't even responding to the coach. I guess you can say they put some effort in yesterday against the Knicks, who are the 3rd seed right now in the East. But, man, it literally is a dumpster fire. And, I mean, it's like a car wreck. You can't turn your eyes away from it. As much as I've tried to just say I don't want to do it, don't care, they keep sucking me in one way or the other. They get me with the Lucy with the football thing, both good and bad. But in light of the Paul George focusing now on basketball, I guess, instead of his podcast, leads to today's question of the day. Is Paul George the worst free agent signing in Sixers history? And they've had a lot. I think, to me, right now, the worst is probably Al Horford. But Paul George is certainly up there. So who do you got as the worst trade or worst free agent signing in Sixers history? Paul George, Al Horford. You could throw Scott Williams in there, Kenny Thomas, Chris Webber. But I think Chris Webber was more, they got him via trade. But Tobias, when they chose Tobias Harris over me, they basically gave Tobias a contract and let Jimmy Butler walk. So many to choose from, but I think Paul George is making a strong case to be the worst free agent signing in Sixers history. So let me know your thoughts. 267-495-8531. That'll get you into the Back to the Future voice and text line. Worst free agent signing in Sixers history. I'm still going Al Horford, but you could make a strong case for Paul George, especially after he said he's going to quit his podcast or go on hiatus to focus on basketball. It's almost March, dude. Like, where have you been? So just let me know your thoughts on that. I'll get more into yesterday's question of the day. Whew. And it was a doozy. Lots of feedback about Jason Peters, but we'll get into that in a minute. Flyers back in action tonight out in Pittsburgh, looking for their 4th in a row. And like I said, if they can just make it entertaining, they might not make it because they have too many teams to jump over, but hopefully we can have some fun hockey and be invested in the Flyers during their stretch run. Trade deadline is coming up, I believe, or if maybe it already passed. Actually, no, it would have already passed. Never mind. Forget the trade deadline thing. But Flyers, Penguins tonight as they're looking to win their 4th in a row and slowly crawl back into the wild card race. Phillies debut what could be their new lineup yesterday. Trey Turner hitting leadoff, Schwarber hitting second, Bryce hitting third, Alec Boehm, and then Bryson Stott. Overall, I think the guys did well. Had a little bit of a scare when Bryce got hit in the arm, and then it looked like it popped off his arm and hit him in the face, but has a bruised tricep. Probably will be okay. Nobody seemed that concerned. It could have been a lot worse than what it was. But I guess my question is, why Schwarber at 2? And is that like a Schwarber thing? I know it's still early in spring training as well, so it kind of take it with a grain of salt, but just curious to know the rationale behind that. But they're back at it today. We'll have more spring training updates tomorrow. All right, let's get into this question of the day. From yesterday, I asked you, where does Jason Peters rank as an all-time Eagle? Top 5, 10, 15, 20. Everybody was all over the place with this. And I said definitely top 15, borderline top 10. I think you could possibly make an argument for top 5, but I don't think he cracks the top 5. I did say that he could be the best Eagles lineman of all time. Lots of pushback from that, including Matt here from Fort Washington.
Jim, Matt from Fort Washington. I think you're a little over your skis on Jason Peters being the top offensive lineman of the Eagles of all time. I wouldn't even put him top 3. I think you got Kelsey, Lane, and I'd even put John Runyon ahead of him in his prime. Not necessarily in that order, but I don't know. I think top of all time, a little bit revisionist.
And look, maybe I am a little over my skis, but I did take the time to sit here and go through. And I think you could I'll give you Kelsey and I'll give you Lane Johnson as the top 2. But who are you going to put up in the number 3 spot? I think it has to be Jason Peters. I don't think it's revisionist history. I don't think I'm all up in my feels because he just retired. I think we forget because he was on some teams that were very underachieving just how good Jason Peters was. The rest of the list then, Kyle from Coatesville said top 20. Ken from Wyncote said he is definitely top 20, top 5 offensive line. I don't know if I agree with his list, though. You got guys like Al Wistert, who Michigan graduate, go blue, College Hall of Famer. His number 70 is retired by the Eagles. Of course, Trey Thomas. A lot of people talking John Runyon, and I love John Runyon, and I think I'm going to piss a lot of more people off today. But John Runyon was a very good player. He's not a Hall of Famer. Jason Peters is a Hall of Famer. John Runyon was a very good player, but he had his struggles with Michael Strahan and the Giants. I think we all liked John Runyon because he was number 69, came out with the big arm pads on, running like a robot. But I think, like I said, I'm not taking anything away from him. He was a key piece to Andy Reid's team. He was like the big first free agent signing that Andy Reid had. But I think when it comes to John Runyon, a lot of people are having revisionist history because we like him. He had that nasty attitude and everything. But I will definitely 100% unequivocally put Jason Peters over John Runyon. But I think John Runyon is number 6 on the list. I go Kelsey, Lane, Jason Peters, Al Wistert, Trey Thomas, and then John Runyon. And then after that, it doesn't, like, you got guys that are interchangeable, I feel. I think Jordan Mailata has a shot to move up there before it's all done. Brandon Brooks was a great offensive lineman. You got Jerry Sizemore from the 1980s. He didn't give up a sack in the Super Bowl year. Of course, the legend Stan Walters. Bob Brown, who's a Hall of Famer. Spent a lot of time outside of Philly, though. But to say that I'm revising history and whatever you want to call it over my skis, I don't think so. I think, if anything, everybody who's discrediting and disrespecting Jason Peters are the ones that are wrong, because like I said, John Runyon. I love John Runyon. I absolutely love him. Another Michigan guy. But I don't think he holds a candle to Jason Peters. I think that Trey Thomas was better than John Runyon. I think you're going to see Jordan Mailata will end up ranked higher than John Runyon. I can make the argument that Brandon Brooks should be ranked higher than John Runyon. So lots of fun debate there. Thank you, Matt from Fort Washington, for calling the Back to the Future voice and text line. Thanks for everybody who participated in this. I usually don't say this, but you're all wrong. Basically, Jason Peters is a top 15 Eagle of all time. I could make a very compelling case that if he's not top 10, he's 11 or 12 in all time for all Eagles players. But maybe I was a little over the top with the best offensive lineman. I certainly think, and I never wanted to make this podcast about numbers and stats and analytics and all the nerdy stuff. But I think if you look at the stats, you certainly could, his numbers would be comparable with that of Lane and Jason Kelce. But I have him solidly right now as the number 3. I practiced what I preach and went through. Here it is. I did my list. If you're watching on YouTube, there's the list. But I think I have him solidly as number 3. But continued, nothing's going on this week besides the discussion of the tush push, a lot of Myles Garrett talk. So let's continue the Jason Peters conversation today if you want. But again, lots of talk about Myles Garrett, whether the Eagles should make an attempt, should not. I think if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Howie, and Howie's going to make it work. I think there's people, I'm in the middle on this, and I've heard people on both sides of the coin, like, absolutely not, no way, don't give up draft picks, don't get this. And I think those people, we got lucky last year with that draft and the fact that we had 2 bona fide stars that started on a Super Bowl winning team. That doesn't happen too often. And I think a lot of times, especially here in Philly, we tend to overvalue. Andy Reid and Joe Banner have us trained from back in the day that you need to draft picks or this. And I think we tend to overvalue our draft picks sometimes. But the guys that are out there like, give up 2 first-round picks for Myles Garrett, I think that's a little over the top. I don't know if I want to give up a player. But at the same time, sure, it may mess up. Because truthfully, if you're going to give up any player, it's probably going to be either Nolan Smith or Jordan Davis to get Myles Garrett. I don't think the people out there that have unrealistic expectations where it's like, oh, let's give up Bryce Huff. I don't think Cleveland's going to do that. And to their credit, Cleveland also said that they don't want to give up Myles Garrett. So we'll see what happens. But I land somewhere in the middle. I'm fine giving up a first-round draft pick, maybe a second-round draft pick, maybe a player. Because again, like the end of the day, it is a business. You're trying to win your second straight Super Bowl. But to say, let's give up 2 first-round draft picks, that's over the top. And to say, oh, we got to keep the draft picks, that's a little bit overvaluing picks sometimes. And again, we got very, very lucky. I can't stress that enough. The draft that Howie Roseman had last year, that does not happen all the time. And truthfully, even the draft from 2 years ago, it took those guys a year or two, or in some cases halfway through this season, to really find their niche. So if you're going to get a guy like Myles Garrett, he's going to come right in. He's already established. So I think just like they did with A.J. Brown when they gave up a first-round pick for A.J. Brown, I would give up a first-round pick and some other picks for Myles Garrett. I don't know if I give up 2 first-round picks. Maybe Myles Garrett 3 years ago, but we'll see how it plays out because it's all speculation at this point because Myles Garrett officially is not even on the trade block right now. But we all know how that works out with general managers. Be sure to check out my boys at the Clashing Conferences podcast. Lots of good things happening at their sports fan network. Go to clashingconferences.com to find out more information on them. And then check out Philly Goat. I told you it's shoe season. I'm looking forward. I'm probably only packing canvas loafers for Clearwater, the Schmitties and the fans. But go check them out. Very, very comfortable. I'm going to probably order my slides today for the pool this summer, the championship slides. So go to phillygoat.com, promo code Jim Montgomery, all one word, to take 10% off your order. That's phillygoat.com, promo code Jim Montgomery to take 10% off your order, and it's the shoes. All right, we're going to go a little bit off the beaten path today, and we don't do a ton of high school sports on this podcast. I try to keep it mainly college and our pro teams. But on this date, in 1996, one of the most anticipated local high school games involving suburban schools. There's always a ton of hype and anticipation when some of the teams in the public league play. But this was a suburban hyped up game, and that game took place today at the Palestra back in 1996. The Coatesville Red Raiders took on the Lower Merion Aces in the first game of a District 1 Quad A semifinal doubleheader. Chester and Plymouth Whitemarsh played in the second game. Now, the Palestra holds about 8,700 fans. There are about 9, 10, some people even speculate 11,000 people in the building to see the two best players in Pennsylvania go at it, Kobe Bryant from Lower Merion and Rip Hamilton from Coatesville. Those two had some battles. They ended up being good friends throughout high school when Rip was in college as well as the pros. But Lower Merion and Kobe Bryant got the best of Coatesville this day, 70-65. It was just an outstanding game, one of the best high school games I've ever seen. Kobe ended the day with 29 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists. Rip had 16 points, 12 rebounds, 6 assists. And the whole story behind this game was just insane. The Coatesville team bus got caught in traffic on 76, so they had to push the game back like 15 minutes. The players got changed on the bus, and they had to run a couple blocks even to get to the Palestra on time for this game. We got there. We took a bus down from one of the buses down from the high school. Got there with my brother. It was so packed. We ended up having, we didn't even have seats. They have the bleachers there, but we had to sit in basically the aisle, on the stairwell, because people were scalping tickets. Everybody wanted to go in and see this game. And it didn't disappoint. From my perspective, Coatesville had not their best shooting night, or they could have won this game. But Kobe was as advertised. He took an alley-oop, reverse alley-oop from the three-point line. It just was absolutely it was one of the best dunks I've ever seen any level, let alone a high school game. And it happened right in front of the basket that we were sitting behind. Jim Calhoun was in attendance, as he was, I think at that point, Rip had already verbally committed to UConn. But to me, it was all about the rivalry. Kobe and Rip. Rip didn't even know who Kobe was, because times were different back then, no internet. But they had a great rivalry. Kobe got the best of him in high school, winning all three games they played. All three were legendary games that went down to the wire. Rip, though, got his revenge in the 2004 NBA Finals when the Detroit Pistons knocked off the Los Angeles Lakers. But they were teammates on AAU. They were both McDonald's All-Americans. They're both Philly Sports Hall of Famers. And like I said, usually you see hype like this for public league games, but this was a hyped-up game for two suburban schools, and it was an absolutely great game. Kobe and Lower Merion would go on to win the state championship that year. Unfortunately for Coatesville, I think that game sort of broke their spirit as they lost in the district consolation game and then lost their first game in the playoffs. I really think because it was that was the game they should have on the biggest stage they had. But on this day back in 1996, Kobe Bryant versus Rip Hamilton down at the Palestra, District 1 Quad A semifinal game. Just one of the greatest high school basketball games I've ever seen. And because they're two local legends, that's why I wanted to discuss a little high school hoop today on a Thursday. Finally today, our Black History legacy maker with Philly ties is Ray Rhodes. Ray Rhodes was a 10th round pick out of Tulsa as a cornerback. He played in the NFL for the Giants and the 49ers. After the 1981 season, he got into coaching with the 49ers, so he is part of the Bill Walsh, and then he went to Green Bay with Mike Holmgren, so he's part of both of those coaching trees. After helping the Niners win the Super Bowl as their defensive coordinator, Super Bowl 29, he was hired by the Eagles to be their next head coach, replacing Rich Kotite. It was Jeffrey Lurie's first hire as a head coach, first head coaching hire as the owner of the Eagles. And he in the process, Ray Rhodes became the first black head coach in Eagles history. And he got the most out of his players. They were kind of a slightly above average team talent-wise, I guess you could say. A lot of aging stars from the Buddy Ryan days. But the first 2 years, he led them to 10-6 records, playoffs both years, got that playoff win against the Lions in the wild card round in 95. But ultimately, lack of having a quality NFL quarterback got to him. He ended up going 6-9-1 and then 3-13. If you remember, that was the who was the guy's name? He was supposed to be the was it Brad Gable? No, not Brad Gable. I forget the quarterback's name. It'll come to me. But ultimately, after that 3-13 season, he was fired as Eagles head coach. Did go 29-34-1, 1-2 in the playoffs. Known more for his motivating. Sometimes it was controversial, where he did a lot of yelling, screaming, challenging guys' manhood. I think ultimately he got the most he could out of those players. But thank you, Ray Rhodes, for some great memories. He was the head coach for 4th and 1. He was the head coach for the James Willis, Troy Vincent interception return in Dallas. He brought Troy Vincent here. I believe he also brought Hugh Douglas here too. Two key pieces for the Eagles during the Andy Reid era. I believe he also was really part of the reason they drafted Brian Dawkins as well. He brought Ricky Waters here from San Francisco. And obviously the high point was that playoff win where they threw up a 55 spot against the Lions down at the Vet. But most importantly, thank you, Ray, for breaking barriers and paving the way for future head coaches, a struggle that, quite frankly, still goes on in the NFL today. There's way more black head coaches now than there's ever been in the NFL, but it's still a struggle, and the fact that it's even a topic of conversation now is absolutely insane. But thanks to guys like Ray Rhodes, Tony Dungy, Art Shell for sort of paving the way for today's black head coaches. So Ray Rhodes, Eagles' first black head coach, is today's Black History legacy maker with Philadelphia ties. On this day in 1996, PIAA District 1 Quad A semifinal down at the Palestra, Lower Merion beat Coatesville 70-65 in a game that featured two future NBA stars and Hall of Famers in Rip Hamilton and Kobe Bryant. Both are Philadelphia Sports Hall of Famers. Obviously, Kobe's in the Naismith Hall of Fame. Rip is in the College Basketball Hall of Fame. He's probably a borderline Naismith Hall of Famer. I don't necessarily think he'll get in, but he's borderline. I was actually talking about him with my daughter the other day after her basketball game, talking about how he moved without the ball and was great on a catch and shoot. But that all happened on this day back in 1996. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on the worst free agent in Sixers history. Is it Paul George? Is it Al Horford? Is it Tobias? Tobias effing Harris over me? Now that I think about it, Tobias Harris could make a run for Al Horford there. But also continue to let me know the Jason Peters thing. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why I sound like the Backstreet Boys now. Tell me why everything is wrong with what I'm saying. We'll be back with another action-packed episode tomorrow on a Feel Good Friday. But for today, this has been This Day in Philly Sports History for February 27th, 2025. My name is Jim Montgomery. Go have yourselves a Thursday. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.